I set the fork down the ocean, hissed below the balcony like it was trying to warn me, and I said the sentence that emptied every glass. This trip is over, and whatever we thought would come after, it is over too. My voice was steady, my chest tight. The waiter froze with a tray of scallops in his hands. Claire blinked as if her contacts had slipped. Her father raised his eyebrows like a gate he owned. Her mother hid a smile she thought I would not notice. I thought about the small camera that carried my mother's fingerprints, a camera that should have been safe in my bag, a camera they had taken, traded, talked about like a toy. And I realized the only person who could stop the slow leak in my life was me. My name is Ethan Cole. I grew up far from velvet chairs and words that taste like money. I inspect old buildings for a living. I read wood like a diary, and I knock on walls to hear what they are hiding. I am good at spotting cracks before they become collapses. I wish I had treated my own life like a house sooner. But love makes the plans look fine from the street. You miss the soft floorboard until you step on it and down you go. I met Claire at a neighborhood art walk. She stood in front of a photograph and said, "The shadows were the real subject, not the couple on the bench." I told her I liked that she told me my coffee looked like motor oil. I told her that was because it worked. She laughed. We walked. We found a truck that sold tacos that were too spicy for people who think water is a flavor. She didn't flinch. She said she loved how city light makes everything look like it has a secret. And I thought I could share mine with you. I told her about my mother, about the way she carried silence like grace, about the camera she used to hold a small film camera that clicked like a soft metronome, how she shot black and white because color felt like lying, how she taught me to frame a moment by breathing first, then looking, then touching the shutter. I saw Claire's eyes soften. She took my hand. We started. Months became a year. Winter left the windows. We had a routine that felt like a song you hum without knowing the words. Sundays we would walk to the flea market and pretend we were furnishing a future apartment. She would hold up a lamp and ask if it looked like us. I said, "Most lamps look like light." And she said, "Be serious, Ethan." I smiled. I tried. I told myself her parents would see me for who I was, not for where I came from, not for the job. I did not for the number of zeros they could not find in my bank account. She told me they were blunt but fair. She said her father, Victor, respected people who worked hard. She said her mother, Elise, could be intense, but she loved fiercely. The words sounded like furniture moved around to make room. I told myself I could live with it. The trip was Elise's idea. A family vacation to Hana, the kind of place that looks like a screensaver infinity pools that pretend to meet the seaward decks that reflect sunsets like they are paid to do it. She said it would be a chance to connect before decisions became paperwork. She said it like we had already signed something we had not. Claire had mentioned a wedding without details. We had not talked about money or vows or anything that matters. She said, "My parents want to know you really know you." The phrase "really know you" should feel like good news. It felt like an audit. I said yes. Anyway, love does that. It turns warnings into weather you think you can handle. Victor booked business class seats for the family. Claire, her brother Drew, his wife Alison, and their 2 kids in a row that looked like tiny living rooms. I was in. Coach 2 sections back near a bathroom that coughed all night. Claire said there had been an issue with the bookings, that she would fix it if she could, that it was too late, the way she said too late, suggested the past had done something naughty, and we all had to accept it. I told myself it was a small thing. I am tall, but I can fold. I listened to a podcast about boats that sink because people keep adding fancy decks to impress other people on other boats. I tried to sleep. The engine hummed like worry, At Kahului, a driver held a sign for the Whitmans. Victor's last name, he did not ask mine, he took their bags. He took Claire's hand luggage, he glanced at mine, he smiled. Thin, I said I could carry my own. The resort appeared like a mirage that did not feel the need to hide. Palms stood like dancers, frozen mid-sway. The lobbies smelled like flowers that had never known pollen. The desk staff said welcome, like they had been practicing my name. They said Whitman with a warmth that did not reach me. I was assigned a garden room close to the path. Nights would carry footsteps the way cheap walls carry arguments. The others had ocean suites, balconies that ate the horizon. Claire said we would be in and out of each other's rooms anyway. I said sure. My voice sounded like a held breath. Day one moved like a brochure. Kids in the pool. Victor on a call with someone who wanted something from him. Elise directing nothing with the energy of an orchestra conductor. Claire and I walked the property. She slipped off her sandals and dipped her feet in a shallow pool that cut through the courtyard. She laughed. She said, "This is nice, right?" I said, "Beautiful." I meant the light on her shoulders. She said, I should not be sensitive about the room. That travel always comes with hiccups. I said I was not sensitive, which is what you say. When you are, I put the small camera on the dresser, the one my mother kept in a drawer. When we did not have film money, I had loaded a single roll for the trip. 36 frames. Careful gifts. I planned to take one of Claire on the beach with the wind, making a mess of her hair, a photo I would keep. Even if we did not keep each other, I did not tell her. That last part, some truths are too honest to share. At dinner that first night, Victor asked me about my work, not like a person interested in what another person does, more like a mechanic. Listening to a rattle, he said, "Buildings are honest, they tell you. When they are tired, do people do that too?"
Ethan, I said yes. If you listen, Elise asked. If I had plans to build a firm to scale, she liked that word. Scale, it made lives sound like charts that go up. If you are good and smart and ruthless, I said, I like the part where the work makes families safer. She said that was adorable. Claire squeezed my knee under the table. A tiny apology. I wanted it to be enough. It was not. Day 2, we took a catamaran out. The sea was the kind of blue you do not try to describe.
Because you will sound like you are lying. Alison kept asking the deckhand if the kids could drive the boat. He said maybe later. Victor told the captain which cove to anchor. The captain nodded, then did what he wanted. Elise asked me if I could swim. I said yes. She said good, it would be awkward if someone had to save me. She laughed. The laugh asked other people to join. They did, because that is what people do when the person who owns the big table at dinner finds something funny. I smiled without teeth. I took a photo of the water. The camera clicked like a small animal, happy to be used again. On the way back, Drew asked if I ever felt like I could do more, earn more, become more. His tone was friendly, like mentorship at a company that will never promote you, I said. More of what he said. Security? The word hung between us like a sign that says, keep off the grass. Claire stood next to Elise and laughed at something I did not catch. The wind pulled her hair across her face. She looked at me. Through it I saw the girl from the art walk, and the woman I might never meet at the same time. I felt a shape in my chest shift like furniture being moved upstairs. I did not know if it meant making space or blocking a door. That evening, my camera was not on the dresser. I had left it where I always leave it, centered, the strap tucked under. I looked in the closet in the bathroom, under the chair. I asked the front desk if anyone had turned in a camera. They smiled and said they would check with housekeeping. I texted, Claire, have you seen my camera? The black one, small. She replied, Mom borrowed it. She wants candid dinner photos. I stared at the phone. The words wanted to jump out and become a sound. I typed, It is not a prop. It is my mother's, she typed. Calm down, she will be careful. I walked to their suite.
Elise held the camera in 2 fingers like a trinket she had won at a festival. She said, "This is antique charming, but the viewfinder is tiny." I said, "It works." She said, "Everything works until it does not." I asked, "May I?" She handed it back slow, like a test, to see if I would snatch. I did not. I said, "Please ask before you take my things." She said, "Of course," in the tone people use when, of course, means never. Day 3, Hana Highway.
Curves that make people pray to deities they never believed in. Waterfalls that look like they miss no one. We stopped at a fruit stand where a woman cut pineapple like a lesson. Elise tried to bargain with a sign. The woman smiled and did not move. The price, Victor bought coconuts and told the kids this was real water, not the kind their mother buys in boxes. The kids asked why boxes had pictures of trees. If they did not come from trees, no one answered. We took pictures on a bridge that leaned toward a valley. I raised the camera, took a frame of Claire laughing at something the kids said it was the thing I had been waiting for. Honest, unposed, she looked like wind. I lowered the camera and the strap caught on the corner of a bag. The camera bumped against the railing, a small, harmless sound. Elise gasped like a drama teacher. She said, "Careful, heirloom insurance is a pain." She smiled.
I smiled back because sometimes that is the only tool you have. That night the camera was gone again. Not borrowed, gone. My room safe was open. I had left it locked, the code still in my head, 4 numbers, with a rhythm. I know what a forced latch looks like. This was not that I knocked on Claire's door. She opened with a towel around her hair. The room smelled like shampoo and a kind of lotion that makes hotels money. I asked about the camera. She bit her lip and said, "Mom took it again."
She wanted to load it with fresh film at the concierge. I said, "I have film." She said, "She already did it." She wanted a different speed for the restaurant. Lighting, my hand touched the door frame. I felt splinters that were not there. I said, "Tell her I will collect it before dinner." Claire said, "Okay." I could hear the small apology in her voice. It bounced off a wall and fell. The restaurant had a deck that hovered over black lava rocks. The ocean made a sound like applause for a show it did not like. Lanterns swayed. A trio played something with strings that made everyone feel tasteful. Victor ordered wine like he was signing a treaty. Elise hugged the manager as if they were cousins. Claire wore a dress the color of the inside of a seashell. I wanted to tell her she looked like a tide that had decided to be kind. I waited for the right moment to ask for the camera. Dessert plates arrived without anyone ordering them. The kids fell asleep against Allison's shoulder, and then Victor tapped his glass with a fork. The room turned its face. He said, "Family is a boat." He said, "You check the hull before you cross an ocean." He said, "Some boards do not belong on certain waters." He looked at me when he said boards. He smiled like he had just saved me from drowning. Elise took the mic the band used between songs and told a story about Claire's first trip to the beach, how she had cried because the sand wanted to come home with her, how she had always had expensive taste even as a toddler, how some people are born for rooms like this. She gestured to the wood, the light, the view, and then she said my mother's name, the name I had told Claire in the kitchen months before when we made eggs at midnight, the name I do not hand to people who do not know what to do with it. Elise said, my mother would be proud that her little camera was finally seeing a nice dinner. She said it with a laugh that asked for friends. Some gave it, Victor added that he admired any woman who taught her son to appreciate quality, even if he could not always afford it. He raised his glass to the concept of reaching. I felt heat behind my eyes, not tears, something else like anger that had learned manners. Claire touched my arm and whispered, "Please not here. I wanted to ask where if not here. Where else do you ask people to stop taking things that are not theirs?" I asked for the camera, softly, like a person asking for a bill at a quiet table. Elise said she had given it to the concierge to keep it safe. I said, "Safe means in my hands." She said, "Do not be dramatic." She smiled at the table like I was telling jokes for dessert. Victor said we could talk tomorrow. I looked at the horizon. It looked back without emotion. I stood. The chair made a sound like a scrape across a chalkboard. My heart did not race. It slowed because decisions like this do not require courage. They require remembering who you promised to be when no one was looking. I set the fork down and I said the thing. I said at the start, this trip is over. And so is whatever comes after it. The room pulled back from me like a tide, leaving a rock. Claire said, "Ethan, please." Her face crumpled. Elise said, "Sit down, you are embarrassing yourself." Victor said, "Be a gentleman."
And I said, a gentleman is a man who returns what he borrowed and stops talking when he should listen. The trio stopped tuning. Silence played. I walked to the host stand, asked for the concierge. A young woman with a badge that said Kira appeared. She looked tired in the way people do when they are asked to solve problems they did not create. I asked for a small black film camera. She looked down, then up. She said she was sorry, and I believed her.
She said a gentleman had already collected it for Mrs. Whitman. He had said he would take it to a friend for a quick cleaning. She pointed toward the lobby. I thanked her. I walked. Victor followed. He called after me. He said I was overreacting. He said it was just a thing the lobby smelled like. Money's idea of flowers. I asked the desk about a camera. The night manager looked at a ledger and then he said a name of a shop down the road. It took 6 minutes to get there.
I know because I counted my breaths we passed. Couples holding hands like the world was not on fire. The shop was open. Of course, there is always a place open when you do not want it to be. The man behind the counter had a smile that looked tired from being used. Too often, Victor walked in behind me, said he would handle it. I put a hand up. The man said, "Can I help you?" I said, "You have a camera that belongs to me." The man said he had a lot of cameras. Victor said, "We just want to buy it back."
His tone like a checkbook. The man looked at Victor's shirt and said that would be fine. I asked what collateral was used. The man tapped a slip. He said a bracelet that looked familiar. Elise's. I closed my eyes. The bracelet would not matter. The act did. The act said, "We can trade your memory for a discount." I said, I did not want to buy anything from anyone. I wanted my mother's ring of light. Hack in the man shrugged. He said he had to account for the fresh roll of film he had put in. For the cleaning he was about to do, I put cash on the counter. The kind of cash that makes a person hesitate. He hesitated. He brought out the camera. I held it like a small animal that had been startled. I looked at the advance lever, at the tiny dent in the base plate. I knew like a freckle. It was mine, not a copy, not a story. Mine, Victor said, "See, problem solved." Which is a thing men say when they put the fire out with gasoline and point to the lack of flame for the next 10 seconds. I walked out. Victor kept talking. I do not know what he said. My ears were full of the ocean. My feet knew the way back in the lobby. Elise stood with Claire. Claire's eyes were glass. Elise's were stone. She said I had made a scene. I said the scene was there before. I stood up. I had just turned on the lights. She said we could discuss this in the morning. Like civilized people. I said civilized people do not take what is not theirs. And they do not call a dead woman's camera cute I told Claire. I cannot be with someone who smiles at that kind of joke. I cannot be someone who teaches you that silence is a strategy, not a betrayal. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. It felt like walking off a boat onto land that moved. I packed the room, suddenly small with all the things I had not said.
I did not slam anything I folded. I tucked the camera inside a sock. Not because it was fragile, but because it felt like tucking a child into a bed. After a bad dream, I left a note for the housekeeper. I thanked them for making a stranger's bed look like home for a few nights. I checked out. The clerk looked nervous and kind. He asked if everything had been to my satisfaction. His script wrong for my stage. I said the pool was nice. He said, have a good night.
His smile almost made me cry. The airport at midnight is a waiting room for decisions. I found a flight that would take me to a different morning. I texted Claire before they closed the door. I wrote, I love you and I am leaving. Love is not the same as permission. Love is not the same as respect. I need both. I put my phone on airplane mode for the first honest time. Somewhere between clouds I slept, or maybe I just held my eyes closed until the dark felt like a friend. Home looked smaller, which is how home looks when you return without the person you thought you would return. With the first day, my phone tried to climb out of its own skin, messages stacked like plates in a sink. Claire, then Elise, then numbers. That thought opinion counted as currency. Victor left a voicemail that used the words regret and immature and future in a single sentence. Drew texted, sorry man, Allison sent a long thing about family being complicated. I made coffee. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, the tile cool like the truth. I put the camera on the table. I opened the back. I took out the roll of film Elise had commissioned for the restaurant lighting. I put it in a drawer. I loaded my mother's preferred stock, the kind that forgives low light and anxious hands. I took a picture of the sink, the kind of picture no one shares, the kind that says I am here. Claire came by 2 days later. She texted, first, can I come up? I said yes. She stood in the doorway like someone who had walked to the wrong address. She started to cry and then swallowed it. She said she had not known her mother was going to pawn the camera. The word pawn made me flinch. She said she had tried to stop them. The past tense did a lot of work. She said she could change, she could draw lines, she could tell her parents. No, I believed she believed it. But I also believed that promises made in the lobby of someone else's hotel are different than promises made at a kitchen table you bought with your own money. I said, I wanted to believe. I also said, I could not be the exercise she used to strengthen a muscle she had never used. She asked if there was any version of us that survived this. I said maybe, but not this version of them and not this version of you. Not now, she nodded. She touched the table with her fingers like she wanted to read the wood grain for answers. She left her perfume in the room for an hour after she left. I took the roll to a lab that knows how to treat old things kindly. The owner knows me, by the way. I set the canister down, not by name. I told him to take his time. He said he always does. Days later, he handed me an envelope. My hands learned to shake for just a second, and then remembered how to be hands. I looked at the prints at a small metal table by a window. Claire on the bridge, laughing, a bird in the far corner, like a dot of hope. A shot of the sea, so smooth it looked false, an accidental frame of my own lap, knees and camera strap, and the corner of a napkin with a stain that could have been wine or could have been sunset. I thought about frames we keep and frames we burn. I thought about not burning anything, just filing it under a letter I do not want to use again. People asked if I was okay the way people do when they mean, will you make me comfortable by saying yes? I said I was in one piece, which is a true thing to say, even when it is not the whole truth. I went back to work. The crawl spaces were still dark, but honest, the roofs still sagged. When they were tired, I told a young couple that the porch they loved needed more support. I told them sooner is kinder. They nodded. They said thank you. I drove away and realized I was giving the advice I had finally taken. I went home. I made dinner. I cleaned my plate. I washed it. I stood with the water running, and I did not cry. On a Saturday, my sister called from another state to tell me her dog had eaten a shoe. I laughed. She asked if I was still mad at the ocean. I said, no, the ocean did its job. It kept coming. She said, that is one way to live. I said, it is another way to drown. We were both right. I put the camera on the shelf where it lives. I touched the dent. I said, good night, Mom, out loud. I am not embarrassed to tell you that I have learned not to be embarrassed by rituals that keep you kind. There is a version of this story where I smile through dessert and make a joke later about how families are complicated and love is a compromise and cameras can be replaced. That story ends on a balcony, with me looking out at a view and feeling something sink below the surface and never rise again. This story ends with me choosing a different verb, not sink, but stand, not swallow, but speak. It ends with a trip that looked like a vacation and turned out to be a map, the kind that shows you which roads do not lead to home, even if the signs say they do. If you are listening to this and wondering when to say no, you probably already know. If you are waiting for permission, this is me handing you a slip of paper that says you do not need it. You can put the fork down, you can stand up, you can collect what belongs to you, you can leave the table. The ocean will still be there, the light will still find the glass, and somewhere in a drawer there is room for a camera that remembers your hands and a roll of film that has not been exposed to anyone else's plan.